The chamber was carved from crystal, a dome of shifting light and sound, humming softly with the breath of the galaxy. Seated in its heart, among species that shimmered, slithered, and sparked, was a woman in a gray military coat and simple boots, utterly human. She sat with a delicate porcelain teacup in her hand, steam rising lazily from the rim like a surrender flag no one noticed. General Evelyn Sharp did not speak. She observed. The high voice of Traskin, a creature of rippling green silk flesh and jeweled tusks, rumbled through the amphitheater. Let it be entered into the record that humanity has, once again, offered no proposals of value. The council invites ideas, not silence steeped in steam. Laughter sparkled among the seats. One of the Yanari clicked its eye stalks in amusement. A rusted chuckle from the Vokar ambassador. Even the chancellor of KRRH beat his wings twice, a sign of mockery. Evelyn raised her cup to her lips. They watched her the way a wolf watches a sleeping doe. Mild curiosity tinged with disbelief that something so still could be real. She wore her humanity like old earth cotton. Unimpressive, familiar, harmless. General Sharp, came the translation through the chamber's AI. Do you have anything to add before we close this session? She looked up. Calm blue eyes, hair tucked behind one ear. No makeup, no fanfare. Just that same serene stillness, the kind one might expect from a woman in a wheat field, not a war room orbiting a dying sun. I find the tea here exceptional, she said. A pause. She let it sit. Then she smiled, a slow, small curve that gave nothing and took everything. The high voice coughed. If you've no real contribution. Oh, I have many, she said gently. But I've learned the galaxy doesn't like when humans speak too soon. More laughter. Nervous this time. Tell me, Evelyn continued, what's the Council's official position on the destruction of the Helios outpost? The question landed like a thunderclap on a still lake. Silence rippled. That matter was addressed, the high voice said slowly. The Helios sector was deemed uninhabitable, she finished. Of course. I remember. And the humans who live there. They were an unfortunate oversight. She set the cup down on its saucer, with a sound like a distant bell. In my world, Evelyn said softly, we bury our oversights. And we don't forget them. A hush. Ambassador Claw of the Thrim wrinkled its bioluminescent brow. Surely General Sharp doesn't imply that humanity wishes to revisit that regrettable chapter? Oh no. She folded her hands neatly. I only mean that we remember the taste of ash. And we make tea anyway. The chamber didn't know what to do with her. It was easier when humans barked, threatened, cried. The others did that too. What unnerved them now was the sheer civility, the calm. Because nothing about Evelyn was threatening. Not the way she sat, spine perfectly upright. Not the faint lines around her eyes, the ghost of middle age. Not her voice, which could have belonged to a schoolteacher reading bedtime stories about stars. But her stillness, the absolute peace with which she occupied that chair, was a warning. A predator didn't roar before it struck. She watched them with gentle interest. Not fear, not hope, interest. She turned to the DRRH ambassador, whose triple maws were still twisted in a smug grin. Do the DRRH still employ slave labor in their shipyards? The ambassador blinked. We prefer the term contractual servitude. And how long are your contracts? Indefinite. For efficiency. Of course, she nodded. Nothing says diplomacy like shackles. The Trascan royal air hissed from the upper dais, its scaled crest shimmering red. Humanity speaks of ethics with one hand while building weapons with the other. Evelyn shrugged. Well, we did learn from you. Earth is primitive, the air sneered. Sentimental. You quote poetry before detonating moons. It's grotesque. Evelyn leaned forward, elbows on the polished table. Her voice dropped just enough for the translators to strain. We quote poetry because we understand what we destroy, and we destroy it anyway. The air opened its mouth, but said nothing. No one moved. Evelyn smoothed the sleeve of her coat. Sentiment isn't weakness. It's what keeps us from killing everything immediately. The Vokar ambassador bellowed a laugh, though no one else joined in. Ah, The famous Terran gallows wit. Yes, Evelyn said. We build gallows very well. A whisper passed between two council members. The translator filtered it as, is she bluffing? She wasn't. But the best bluffs look like truth, and the best truths were the mask of madness. An aide approached her, young, sharp-suited, eyes hidden behind tinted glasses. He leaned close, whispered something behind a neutral expression. Evelyn's nod was almost imperceptible. She picked up her tea again. The high voice bristled. Let us proceed to vote on the matter of Outer Rim expansion. Earth's territory claim. Withdrawn. Evelyn interrupted softly. Withdrawn. The chamber echoed it back like a cough. We've reconsidered, she said, brushing a crumb from her collar. Territory is a distraction. We prefer access. Access to what? To everything, she said. And somehow, she made it sound like she was reading a recipe aloud. The Chancellor of KRRH squawked. You cannot expect the Council to accept such vague. Oh, we don't expect anything. Evelyn's gaze swept the room, polite, sad. Expectations are dangerous. That's why we never bring them to the table. She smiled again, the kind that made warlords pray. One of the Yanari leaned forward, eyes wide and glowing. What do humans want then? Evelyn set her cup down and stood. For the first time, the entire chamber saw her in full, 5 feet, and some inches of warforged silence in diplomatic wrapping. No armor, no weapons, just that same small, steady presence. We want tea that isn't poisoned. We want homes that don't burn. We want our dead to stay buried. We want peace. But if we can't have that, she paused, then we'll settle for obedience. The room trembled slightly, not from her words, but from the sudden, quiet activation of the defense shields around the human sector. A subtle flicker of light. Most didn't notice, but a few did. The Trascan heir stood. This is treason. Evelyn tilted her head. No, she said. This is afternoon tea. Then she picked up her coat, thanked the translator AI in 3 languages, and walked toward the exit. No one stopped her. She reached the door, paused, then turned back with a final smile, so warm it ached. Oh, Your Highness, she said to the Trascan heir. Yes. Your family may want to skip dinner tonight. The door hissed shut behind her, and the chamber suddenly felt colder. They invited Earth as a courtesy, a species with no wormhole mastery, no interstellar colonies over 10 light-years out, no legacy beyond wars too localized to scar the stars. Humans were, to the Council, a curiosity, like a museum relic that occasionally smoked, laughed too loud, and quoted dead philosophers during power negotiations. But humans took the invitation seriously. They sent Evelyn. At first, she wasn't even a general, just an observer. No epaulets, no entourage, just a journal, a pair of wire-rimmed glasses, and a scarf from her mother that smelled faintly of cinnamon. The Council had expected a hawk. Instead, they got a woman who knitted during budget hearings and asked if there'd be cookies. For 2 years, she spoke little and listened much. Every corridor conversation, every offhand insult muttered in untranslated slang, every double blink or tail twitch or mandible quiver, Evelyn saw, cataloged, and remembered. She didn't correct them when they called humans ambitious little mammals. She only smiled and tucked another page into her journal. We underestimated her, muttered Chancellor Olorix of the Wendari years later, moments before his planetary vault system collapsed under a silent Terran cyber offensive. At the time, though, no one thought Evelyn Sharp was dangerous. Not when she politely complimented the Thrim on their opera traditions. Not when she sent native Terran spices to the Jeru ambassador's nesting wife. Not when she offered a lullaby to the panicked larva of the Chancellor of KRH during a bombing evacuation. She was kindness wrapped in protocol. And protocol, as any human strategist knows, is the perfect hiding place. The first test came in the 5th month. A motion to relocate Terran satellite rights was passed unanimously while Evelyn was out of the chamber. No one notified her. No one cared. When she returned and saw the vote results, she smiled and nodded. Of course, she said, happy to comply. Within a week, 4 of the voting ambassadors lost control of their planetary data, arrays to malfunctions. Evelyn sent fruit baskets, handwritten notes, apologies for the terribly inconvenient solar flares. No one proved it was retaliation, but the council started double-checking Evelyn's seat occupancy before taking a vote. She never objected to mockery. That would have been too human, too reactive. She embraced it. Let the aliens joke. Let them believe humans were strange and sentimental, obsessed with film, weather metaphors, and revenge novels. She was grateful for every caricature. It meant they were looking away. Behind her sat the quiet machinery of a species never designed for galactic diplomacy. Earth didn't build peace with treaties. They survived through adaptation, observation, pattern recognition, and, when needed, violence so complete it didn't have to repeat. Evelyn remembered a line from her old history professor. Humans didn't conquer nature. They waited until it got tired. By the end of the first year, she knew the mating schedules of the Thrym, the nutrient vulnerabilities of the Trascan royal line, and which council factions could be bought with old Terran jazz. She attended every celebration, never missed a funeral, memorized every cultural taboo, then subtly broke none. She was utterly forgettable in a way that left no defense against her memory. And she passed everything home. The translator pins they all wore, a gift from Earth, upgraded quarterly. Every iteration a little smarter, a little more loyal to Evelyn's voice. The air purification systems in the council dome, Earth donated those, too. Filtered alien breath with a warmth that smelled like baked bread and safety. It made them comfortable. She counted on that. The high voice of Trascan once asked her, during a particularly dull summit, why she always looked so at ease. I grew up beside a sleeping bear, she replied. You learn to move quietly. He laughed. She didn't. Behind Evelyn stood a small team of human aides, each assigned to different species for cultural immersion. Most were graduate students. One was a florist, another a retired submarine engineer. The Wendari ambassador once scoffed, "Where are your soldiers?" Evelyn offered her warmest smile. "We don't send soldiers to councils. We send mirrors." The ambassador didn't understand, but the humans did. Each aide documented everything, from room temperature preferences to the way certain aliens blinked when lying. One aide specialized in interpreting laughter. Another built a joke database to test which races responded with delay versus reflex. All of it mattered. Patterns became strategies. One evening, long after the council's festivities had dimmed and alien dignitaries oozed into their sleep dens or folded into stasis chambers, Evelyn remained. She sat in the central chamber, alone, under the stars visible through the crystal dome, with a mug of tea going cold beside her. A soft buzz in her ear. "Confirming package received," said a voice in her intercom operatives in place. Evelyn nodded. "Trascan wine stock has been tagged." "Yes, General. All ceremonial bottles. Nanotech hidden in sediment layers. Untraceable. Timers await verbal key." She exhaled slowly. Let it steep. The stars above winked in artificial constellations, each assigned to a species, each burning bright on maps that erased entire human generations from memory. Evelyn had stared at those stars for 6 years now. She never resented their brightness. She resented their arrogance. "We were never invited to rule," her grandmother once told her. "So we learned how to take notes while everyone else sang." There had been songs, boasts, species after species proclaiming peace, unity, democracy. But none had mourned Helios. None had wept for the 5,000 colonists cooked alive when the Trascan mistakenly classified the moon as mining compatible. No reparations. No trials. Just words. So many words. Evelyn stopped crying about it years ago. She simply got promoted. The aides, her mirrors, never knew the full plan. But they trusted her. She never raised her voice. Never issued threats. Just adjusted timelines. Shifted dinners. Recommended which ambassador should receive which Terran gift basket based on past behavior. Everything she did was a test. Everything they failed taught her something new. Even Earth's mistakes became weapons. There was one night, deep in Year 3, when the Council accused Earth of espionage. They had intercepted a Terran signal bouncing off a secure comm node. The Council summoned Evelyn at midnight. She arrived in slippers. "My apologies," she said, yawning. "I assumed we only convened for planetary genocide or snacks." They shouted, accused, demanded explanations. She offered none. Instead, she gave them a Terran proverb: never corner something that builds traps for fun. Then she left. The Council's paranoia doubled overnight. Members started accusing each other of alliances with Earth. Perfect. They did her work for her. What humans lacked in star-forging tech, they made up for in story-forging, in mimicry, in timing. And Evelyn's timing was almost up. Back in her private chamber, lined with sound-muffling polymer and old family photographs, she sat before a holographic table. One image shimmered above the rest. The Trascan royal family, laughing, drunk, holding Terran wine. Evelyn zoomed in, watched the queen lift her glass to a crowd. Her teeth gleamed. The nanites inside the bottle shimmered faintly, just a pulse of light, gone too fast for any alien eye to catch. They'd been drinking it for months now. "Observation phase complete," whispered a voice through the comm. Evelyn touched the side of her neck, triggering a secure channel. "Good," she said. And then, very softly, like she was humming to herself, "Begin countdown." Outside her chamber, the Council prepared for another day of speeches, another day of tea. And inside Evelyn's quiet smile, something ancient stirred. A reckoning dressed as a diplomat. There was a particular silence that only filled the Galactic Council chamber when someone finally realized they were prey. It didn't arrive suddenly, but seeped in between translated murmurs, behind hasty glances at blinking security feeds, beneath the ceremonial pomp that now clung to the floor like dust on a battlefield. Evelyn Sharp was smiling again. Not the soft curve she offered at dinners. Not the diplomatic upturn of lips that paired with polite nods and tasteless wine. No, this smile had gravity. It pulled at the air around her, tilted the tone of the room, warped comfort into something cold. Chancellor Dvoth of the Trascan Empire narrowed his eyes, shifting his great coiled bulk in the crimson-lit gallery above. "You seem pleased this morning, General." Evelyn, seated alone at the circular Terran dais, lifted her cup without urgency. "It's the cinnamon. You know how nostalgia sweetens bitterness." There was something off in her voice. Not louder, not sharper, just centered, like the eye of a storm that had been patiently circling for years and had finally arrived. The high voice of Trascan cut in with a diplomatic chuckle. "Forgive the interruption, but I believe we were discussing Earth's territorial overreach. The matter of the Kepler vector is still unresolved." "Oh, it's resolved," Evelyn said, setting down her tea. "You just haven't caught up yet." Another silence. It was the second one in under a minute. That made people nervous. Ambassador Zadavianari, usually unreadable behind his opaline faceplate, leaned forward. "Is that meant to be a threat?" "No," Evelyn replied. "It's an inevitability." Eyes darted across the chamber, some in confusion, others in the growing twitch of dread. One of the guards along the western wall, a decorated Trascan honor guard in pearl armor, checked the safety on his plasma staff without meaning to. Evelyn caught the motion. She didn't move. She didn't need to. The aide beside her, a Terran civilian in council regulation robes, slipped her a datapad under the table. The message on its screen glowed faintly. "All external royal escorts neutralized. 0 casualties on human side. No alerts triggered. She read it once, blinked, and handed the pad back like she'd been passed a menu. The Trascan heir, young and swollen with inherited privilege, stood from his seat 2 tiers above. "We demand an immediate review of Earth's military presence in the outer sectors. Human fleets have doubled in 4 rotations. This council has rules, General." "Yes," she said, "and you've broken most of them. You come here with smiles and silk-slick metaphors, hiding behind tea and traditions. But your species poisons peace with misdirection and mockery." "Correction," she said evenly. We poison nothing. She looked up and locked eyes with him. You drank it willingly. The air faltered. He hadn't expected that. Not from her. Not here. Before the council's eyes, Evelyn tapped the side of her wrist. A soft chime rang through the chamber, harmless, almost melodic. At first, nothing changed. Then the lights dimmed. Not all at once, but in sequence, as though some ancient hand were drawing its fingers across the stars. One by one, the illumination over the Trascan dais flickered. Ambassador Zot's holotranslator sputtered. The KRRH banners above began to flutter, though there was no wind in the sealed dome. A hiss of confusion rolled through the assembly. Council systems are experiencing a minor outage, the AI host said calmly. Please remain seated. Evelyn lifted her teacup again, blew across it softly. The thing about stories, she said aloud, is that they're only fiction until the ending hits. Chancellor Dvathes' crest began to shift from purple to red. General Sharp. What is happening? A history lesson, she said, her voice unbothered. Do you remember Helios? He didn't answer. No one did. She looked down into her cup and stirred it gently. Of course you do. It was the moon colony you incinerated during a trade dispute. I remember the files. The Trascan representative called it an unfortunate example of kinetic diplomacy. That event was misrepresented. She set the cup down without sipping. My sister was there. The Trascan air froze mid-gesture. The room changed. It wasn't in lighting or decor. It was in air pressure. In the way people shifted in their chairs. In the way certain aides began to realize they had memorized emergency exits, but never once practiced using them. I didn't come here for revenge, Evelyn said. That would have been satisfying, but inefficient. She stood, slowly, gracefully. I came here to study, to observe the limits of your diplomacy, your morality, your appetites. She walked forward, the hem of her uniform whispering across the polished floor like a knife being unsheathed in velvet. And you know what I learned? The high voice was rigid. The heir's eyes were wide and unblinking. Evelyn stopped at the edge of the central platform. That the galaxy respects violence more than virtue. That power is measured not in peace, but in silence, the kind you enforce by making others too afraid to speak. Zot rose. Is this a coup? She smiled, that gentle smile again, the one they were finally beginning to understand wasn't friendly. This is a warning label, she said, motioning to her face. You just never bothered to read it. An emergency override flashed red on the security console to the right of the chamber. But the panel didn't respond. Another message flickered behind Evelyn on the council's central display. All Royal Trascan escorts. Terminated. Doors sealed. System lockout in effect. Gasps. The Trascan heir leapt to his feet, a vibrating scream pouring from his throat. This is an assault. She's declared war. No, Evelyn said. I just ended one. You started it. When you burned Helios. When you laughed at our graves. When you patted our heads and told us to sit quietly while you redrew maps and renamed scars. You'll be killed for this. You'd have to catch me first. Another message appeared. To all council systems. From Terran Network 01. Retranslation protocols activated. Council AI has been migrated to Human Linked Core. Asset. Sharp E. Granted executive privileges. A cold ripple swept the chamber. They hadn't just underestimated humanity. They'd given them the keys. You invited us to observe, Evelyn said, turning in a slow circle. So we did. We watched. We listened. We recorded. Every vote. Every treaty. Every secret meeting. Every bribe. Every military route embedded into your oh-so-secure satellites. Aide Gresh, standing silent at the back of the human platform, tapped something into his palm. All across the chamber, hidden projectors shimmered to life. Images of Trascan torture rooms. Yanari drug trades. Illegal Wendari G markets. All of it. Everything they thought was hidden behind interstellar encryption. You kept forgetting we were watching, Evelyn said. You shouldn't have. The high voice clutched the side of his dais, claws scraping crystal. We must evacuate the royals. You should have done that yesterday, Evelyn said softly. A moment passed, and then she tapped her wrist again. This time, the sound that followed was not a chime. It was silence. A sudden, sharp drop in the room's biological telemetry. The Trascan heir gasped, then fell to his knees. So did the queen, still seated, her goblet slipping from her hand with a soft metallic chime. From the rear balcony, an aide screamed. But Evelyn stood still, calm, upright, watching. It was never the tea, she said gently. It was the wine. Nanotech, suspended in Terran sediment. Heat triggered. Trascan blood only. Took months to refine. I wanted to make sure it was painless. The queen gurgled something. Whether a curse or a plea, no one knew. Evelyn stepped back as they collapsed, one after another, crown jewels rolling across the floor like broken toys. Then she sat again. No flourish. No speech. Just a woman reclaiming her chair. Zot was shaking. What have you done? Evelyn looked up. I told you. A history lesson. But they were heads of state. They were architects of genocide. She glanced toward the human aides. All recordings secure? Confirmed. Broadcast to outer rings? In process. She looked at the council. Some stared at her in horror. Others quietly nodded. The room wasn't broken. It was realigned. The KRRH chancellor spoke finally. You've weaponized diplomacy. Evelyn didn't smile this time. She just breathed. We taught ourselves to survive empires by pretending to belong inside them. She stood once more and walked out of the chamber. No guards followed. The doors sealed behind her with the finality of history books slamming shut. In the corridor beyond, dimly lit and whispering with distant alarms, her aide fell in step beside her. What now? He asked. She looked ahead into the long, quiet light. Now we set the table, she said, and wait for the rest of the galaxy to ask if they can join dinner. Then she opened the next door, and the lights inside it were already Terran blue. The Trascan Queen's corpse hadn't cooled before Council security began pounding on the sealed dome. Inside, there was no panic, just quiet reorganization. Evelyn Sharp remained at the Terran dais, her fingertips resting lightly on the arm of her chair, like she'd simply finished a meeting early. Around her, aides moved efficiently, disarming hidden scanners, disabling local surveillance, transmitting encrypted summaries to the outer Terran fleet. Chancellor Dvoth of the Trascan blinked through the rising mist of failure. His crest was pale now, lifeless. You've doomed your species. Evelyn didn't answer. Not because she didn't have words. Because his were still catching up to the moment. The dome's walls pulsed with red, pulsing alerts like a warning heartbeat. Alien officials shouted orders, translators malfunctioned under stress, and the intercom began echoing a looping security call. Seal the exits. Contain the human. Contain. As though she was a virus. As though she hadn't just spent 6 years recording every movement, routine, and weakness inside this dome. As though she hadn't already chosen the exact location and moment where history would fold. The KRRH Chancellor's wings flared. General Sharp, explain yourself before this escalates. She turned toward him. It's already escalated. Ambassador Zot barked through trembling speech valves. You assassinated a ruling bloodline in front of the council. Do you understand the chaos that unleashes? Evelyn stood slowly, smoothing the folds of her uniform. I didn't assassinate them. Her voice was calm, final. I delivered overdue accountability. The Yanari aide reached for a communicator. Evelyn's gaze shifted, and before his claw could touch the panel, the console sparked violently, disabling in a hiss of fried circuits. You've corrupted our systems, someone shouted. No, she said softly. You trusted them to us. The main entrance groaned behind her. Security had brought plasma cutters. The dome's doors, grown from crystalline carbon, began to fracture. Evelyn didn't flinch. She tapped a button on her wristband. The room's oxygen regulation dropped by 3%. Just enough to make certain species lightheaded. Just enough to shift the balance of power by breath alone. The Trascan heir, clutching the edge of a collapsed podium, glared through grief and rage. We hosted you. We elevated you. And you repay us with blood. Evelyn's voice cracked like flint. You hosted us like a farmer hosts the pig he plans to slaughter. You voted to erase us. You funded our enemies. And you called it diplomacy. He stood, arms trembling. You'll be hunted, burned from the stars. She nodded once. And your species will remember what hunted means. The last line of the dome's entry seal exploded inward. Smoke poured in. Dozens of armor guards swept through, weapons raised, some Terran-made, others designed for wars older than Earth's oceans. Energy cannons, electric polearms, sound blades calibrated for the human nervous system. Evelyn raised one hand slowly. The guards froze, not by command, by recognition, because among them were humans, hidden in the multiracial force, silent for years, planted like seeds. One by one, those humans turned and drew their weapons on the others. Within 3 seconds, the chamber became a blur of motion. The first shot came not from a soldier, but from Evelyn's aide, Gresh. He didn't shout. He didn't posture. He fired a clean pulse into the Trascan heir's chest. The heir fell. No scream. The Yanari aide lunged for cover, but Evelyn stepped toward him with eerie grace. Her hand moved once, just a flick, and a thin disc sliced through the air, embedding in his neck. Silent, lethal. Chaos erupted. But Evelyn was calm. She moved like the room had always belonged to her, like she was rearranging furniture in her own house. Every action measured, every step pre-selected. The remaining Trascan loyalists raised their weapons. Evelyn's humans didn't fire first. They waited. Waited for permission that came not through words, but her eyes. Then it began. In the span of 6 seconds, every hostile guard lay unconscious or dead. No screams. No mess. Just bodies and disbelief. Ambassador Zot, breath ragged, crawled to a corner. We signed accords. You broke them the day you bombed our colony for minerals. We offered compensation. You offered condolences after you sterilized a continent. She turned toward him slowly. You told us we were fragile, that our hearts made us weak. But do you know what it means to grieve while smiling at your killer? To eat beside the ones who buried your kin and act as if the wine tastes the same. Zot shook his head. That's not diplomacy, she said. That's war in formal wear. A console flashed again, this time from the Council's internal AI, now stripped of its multilateral jurisdiction. A singular phrase blinked across the screen. Terran Protocol, Dawn's Eclipse, engaged. The KRRH Chancellor staggered back. What is that? What are you doing? Evelyn turned toward the center platform, where a circular display rose from the floor, illuminating a galactic map. Red dots bloomed across dozens of systems. Weapons depots, shield grids, shipyards, all disabled. All Terran. You gave us access, she said. Every treaty, every trade agreement, every port you let us dock in, we took notes. And when you laughed at our small fleets and short lives, we built while you bragged. You can't conquer the Council. We didn't, she said. We just made sure it couldn't conquer us. She approached the center platform and placed her palm on the activation plate. A hologram shimmered, an image of her sister. Helios Colony, age 23, smiling, burning. The room held its breath. Her name was Mara, Evelyn whispered. She wanted to be an architect. She died under a sky she helped terraform. She turned to the remaining council members, voice clear and precise. Every chamber where her name was ignored. Every joke you made about humans and their grief. Every dismissal you signed without looking up. You wrote this moment yourselves. A burst of static buzzed through the intercom. Then a voice. Council Station Defense Systems, reclassified. Terran override accepted. The galaxy's most powerful diplomatic compound now answered to Earth. The dome shook, not from fire, but from the sound of realization breaking through. You planned this from the beginning, muttered Voth, stumbling to his knees. No, Evelyn said. I hoped it wouldn't be necessary. Another aide, young, trembling, raised his hands. Please. We're not your enemy. We didn't vote for Helios. Evelyn looked at him, quietly. Then she extended a hand and held him up. I know, she said gently. We're not here to annihilate. We're here to end annihilation. A brief moment of stillness returned. Then the main screen above her head flashed again, this time showing the galaxy's rim sectors. One by one, human ships emerged from cloaked positions. Thousands. Not a fleet for conquest. A wall for defense. Evelyn stepped forward. She wasn't armed. She didn't need to be. Tell your systems, she said. Tell your species. Humanity isn't here to beg for mercy or barter for recognition. She walked slowly back toward the Terran seat. We're here to say the rules have changed. A pause. She sat and poured another cup of tea. A soft clink echoed through the quiet as porcelain met porcelain. Then she looked up. The final line she delivered wasn't shouted. It wasn't even spoken in command. It was just truth, spoken as if it had always been waiting. We offered peace for years, but sometimes peace needs teeth. The doors remained open behind her now, but no one moved toward them. No one dared. Outside, across 100 systems, silence swept through fleets and command rooms as Earth ships formed a single shape on the star map. A circle, not enclosing, but protecting. She hadn't come to reign. She'd come to make sure no empire ever did again. And as the chamber watched her sip her tea, someone whispered the line that would be carved into memory. That's not a general. Another answered, voice shaking. That's a reckoning in a uniform.